Let's bring in the President's National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, right now. Jake, thank you for joining us this morning. So you just heard Martha Raddatz say desperate measures by Vladimir Putin. We saw that shakeup in the defense ministry overnight, these protests in the street. There was a lot of confusion in the run-up to his national address. Is his hold on power secure?
Well, it's difficult to tell in any totalitarian dictatorship where one man controls everything, just how tight a grip that person has on power. And as Ernest Hemingway said about bankruptcy, you can see governments crack up gradually and then suddenly. So we can't predict what happens inside of Russia with Vladimir Putin. What we can do is continue to support Ukraine and its right to defend itself, its sovereignty, its territorial integrity. And President Biden has authorized even further security assistance to provide Ukraine with the weapons that it needs to defend its land, to retake territory that was occupied by Ukraine, and to ensure that Ukraine is in the best possible position on the battlefield.
Another extraordinary address by President Zelensky last night, speaking directly to the Russian people, urging them to resist. Will President Biden echo that call?
What President Biden is going to focus on, as I just said, is how to put the Ukrainians in the best position possible. The future of Russia is for the Russian people to decide. For the United States, we have a clear mission, and it's a mission that we have been laser focused on for several months. And that's to make sure that the weapons and the intelligence and the information that Ukraine needs to be able to successfully defend its own country, that they get that. We've been in close touch with the Ukrainians throughout this conflict. We have also been providing them financial and humanitarian assistance to alleviate the suffering of their people. And what you see inside Russia right now, this call-up of troops, the sham referenda that they're trying to run in the occupied territories, these are definitely not signs of strength or confidence. Quite the opposites. They're signs that Russia and Putin are struggling badly, and it will be the Russian people ultimately who make the determination about how Russia proceeds and the extent to which that there is resistance and pushback to what Vladimir Putin has tried to do, calling up these hundreds of thousands of young men.
Do you want them to rise up and replace Putin?
Look, again, at the end of the day, the future of Russian politics is going to be dictated not by Washington, not by anyone in Europe, but by the people inside Russia. And what you are seeing in the streets right now is a deep unhappiness with what Putin is doing, because he has been lying to his people all along. He tried to call this some kind of special military operation, when in fact it's a war of conquest, a war, as you heard President Biden say, to extinguish Ukraine's right to exist as a people. I don't think that's very popular in Russia, and that's why young Russian men are not eager to go join the fight, and many of them, in large numbers, are fleeing to the borders, fleeing to the airports, or just outright resisting. That's not a surprise to us, but at the end of it all, we have to keep our focus where we can make the biggest difference. And the biggest difference we can make is to help Ukraine tangibly, sustainably, and effectively. That's what we've been doing. That's what we'll continue to do.
How serious was the nuclear threat that Putin made this week, and how will President Biden respond if he makes good on it?
We're taking it seriously. It's not the first time President Putin has made a nuclear threat in this conflict. He started way back in February when Russian tanks first rolled across the border, brandishing that nuclear card. And that has not deterred us from providing more than $15 billion in weapons to Ukraine, helping them be able to defend their country. And it will not deter us now. And we have communicated directly, privately, to the Russians at very high levels that there will be catastrophic consequences for Russia if they use nuclear weapons in Ukraine. We have been clear with them and emphatic with them that the United States will respond decisively alongside our allies and partners. And we have protected those communications, which we have done privately to the Russians, but they well understand what they would face if they went down that dark road.
So that means taking the fight directly to Russia.
We have communicated to the Russians what the consequences would be, but we've been careful in how we talk about this publicly, because from our perspective, we want to lay down the principle that there would be catastrophic consequences, but not engage in a game of rhetorical tit for tat. So the Russians understand where we are. We understand where we are. We are planning for every contingency. And we will do what is necessary to deter Russia from taking this step, and if they do, we will respond decisively.
Let me also ask you about these protests in Iran. Are they a threat to the regime, to the survival of the regime?
Well, it's like the question you asked about Putin's Russia right now, where he's seeing protests. You know, the United States hasn't necessarily, over many decades, had a great track record in perfectly predicting when protests turn into political change. And I can't perfectly predict that sitting here today. What I can say is they do reflect a deep-seated and widespread belief among the population of Iran, the citizens of Iran, the women of Iran, that they deserve their dignity and their rights. And the United States is being absolutely clear and firm, publicly, from the well of the United Nations, as you heard President Biden speaking out on behalf of the universal human rights of all of the citizens and all of the women of Iran. And we're taking tangible steps, too, to help facilitate the access of Iranian citizens to the means to communicate with one another and to connect with the internet so that they can have their voices heard inside Iran and outside Iran. And we will continue to do that because we believe that it is our duty to stand with people who are trying to stand up for themselves.
Some Republicans in Congress have said the crackdown on the protests are reason enough to walk away from the Iran nuclear talks. Is it time to walk away?
Well, first, George, let me just say that the fact that we are in nuclear talks is in no way slowing us down from speaking out and acting on behalf of the people of Iran. We're not going to slow down 1 inch in our defense and advocacy for the rights of the women and citizens of Iran. But at the same time, at the height of the Cold War, at the very moment that Ronald Reagan was calling the Soviet Union an evil empire, he was also engaged in arms control talks, because he knew that on the one hand, we had to push back vigorously against the repression and violations of human rights of the Soviet Union, and at the same time, we had to protect and defend the security of ourselves, our allies, and our partners. The same thing is true with respect to making sure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon that they can threaten the world with. And to do that, we believe diplomacy is the best option.
Jake Sullivan, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.